So again, we're going to do the King's Gambit Part 2. So what I originally intended was to do a 2-part series, but it's been so much fun, it's going to be a 3-part series. So today we will approach the main line, but we won't get there. We'll be focused mostly on the King's Gambit declined. So as we remember, we get the King's Gambit, and we'll go over 2 different ways in this position that black can decline the gambit, that is, not to take on f4. And the first one we'll go over is the classical variation, a Danny Machuca specialty. So when he heard that we were going to cover this, he had to cancel his lesson so that he could come to class. That was very good. So we're going to go over that. And then a little bit later, we'll go over the Falkbeer Countergambit, a very aggressive try by black to unbalance the game. And we'll take a look. But let's focus first on the classical variation. So bishop c5 is a very logical move in this position. Thank you very much. Because after white has played the move f4, what he's weakened is this diagonal here. So black puts his bishop there, which can prevent white in a lot of lines from castling. So that makes a lot of sense. And we'll look at one mistake that's going to recur in a lot of these lines. One move that would just be a mistake here would be to think you can just win this pawn. Because I'll ask the audience, what would black play here? Let's see, the front or the back? Who knows it?
Queen to h4.
Awesome. Yeah, queen h4. And so this is the typical mistake you can make when you move your f-pawn, is to forget about this queen check. So this we're going to have to look at in every single line. Because here, okay, if you play g3, then you would lose something here. And okay, this also would be even worse. Because now this is checkmate. So that'd be even worse. Which is why you can't just take it, so you develop your knight. And now black protects his pawn with d6. Now if you just go sort of routinely through the opening here as white, and she opened all the doors. How did that happen? It's scary out there, Lulu. What about that door?
What?
It's scary.
I'm closing the door so I can come back in now.
All right. But if you're a bit too casual here as white, thank you. Let's just develop our pieces to normal squares. Okay, so this just shows sort of some normal development that you might play. And we could say black might play bishop to g4. He might play a6 so that white doesn't play knight to a4. And white here should not be better. He does have a little bit more space on the king side. That's good. But the fact that he can't castle and black has really active piece play should offset any advantage that white has. So this isn't the most testing way for white to play, although it's definitely a playable option. So more challenging, if we go back to his position here, is what move, Danny Machuca?
Pawn c3.
Yeah, pawn to c3. So this is showing white is going to try to play d4 as early as possible and just establish a huge pawn center, and we'll see what happens. Okay, black almost invariably plays knight to f6, and white goes through with his plan, pawn to d4. Okay, and now after this exchange, I have a question for the class that Danny Machuca can't answer because he knows it very well. What should black do in this position? So your bishop is attacked. So you have 2 moves. You can go back to b6, or you can play bishop to b4, which is check. So I'll ask the audience, what would you guys think is the better move here? Because it's already an interesting decision that black has to make.
On the diagonal.
Okay, and what's your reasoning?
If white castles king side, it's still a weak diagonal. Advantage of it.
Okay, so you're hoping, yeah, if white ever castles in the future, that you still have this bishop on this nice diagonal. Well, not that diagonal, but boop. This diagonal? Okay, and that is the main move. And another reason that you don't want to play bishop to b4 check is you're helping white develop his pieces. So after white plays the move bishop to d2 and you exchange, you've helped white develop his pieces. Your bishop went to f5 and then to b4 and then to d2, only to help white develop his knight. And also, if you don't play aggressively here as black, if we just make some typical moves, white sort of just has the center for free. So this should be better for white in this position. And this is the sort of thing that white is hoping for. So if we'll go back and we'll play bishop to b6, which is the main move here. And okay, yeah, it does make sense just not to develop his pieces. And yeah, this is a relatively nice diagonal for the bishop. So will white be able to blunt that bishop with his pawn here? Okay, so what typically happens is they develop. And we'll just look at this position here. So you could just play bishop to d3 and castling. But white can also try to immediately play for an advantage here by playing e5 immediately. So in this position, we could take. And okay, after the knight moves, white can play another aggressive move. Bishop to g5. Yeah, our audience just got a lot lower rated. So we lost a lot of rating points. Okay, so what should black do here? Well, the most common move is trading, which does, of course, help white to develop his center. But black is hoping to take advantage of some of these weak squares. So we'll just go a couple more moves here. Okay, not letting the knight into e4. And so black is hoping in the long run that white is overextended in the center. And there's some weaknesses there. So in the future, he might play moves like bishop to g4 and c5, knight to c6, and attack the center. But white has a lot of attacking chances in this position. There's no knight on f6. There's this bishop and this queen. I thought she was going to leave, and then it was going to be like a higher rated class all of a sudden. It's very strange stuff is happening in the back of the room today. Okay, so yeah, so white is hoping for some good attacking chances, and we'll leave it here. This is sort of the main position that you might get something like this, which is why, okay, the classical is not the most popular way anymore, unless you're playing against Danny Machuca, then it's... Okay, but we'll go back. So that's a brief introduction into the classical. But the main focus of our lecture is going to be another aggressive way to try to turn the tables on white. So this is a counter gambit, the Falkbeer Countergambit. And so instead of white offering a pawn, black offers a pawn. So he's trying to say, I know you're like an aggressive player because that's why you played the King's Gambit. You want to sack everything. Well, how about I offer you a pawn instead? And almost universally, white takes here. And now we're going to look at 3 different moves in this position. It doesn't seem like there's that many, but there's actually quite a lot of options. The main move is e4, so we'll come to that last. But with this move, black is saying, okay, this is going to be an annoying pawn in your camp, and I'm preventing you from playing the normal developing move, knight to f3. And it's very similar to the Albin Countergambit, except for it's on the king's side. So the Albin Countergambit, for those who haven't seen it before, is in this normal position, the move e5, which is the same sort of point. When they take, you push, and now you can't play knight to c3. Though it's a little bit different when you play it in this move order, because it's on the king's side, which can mean more dangers for white, especially you always have to be looking out for this check. But as long as you have g3, then usually you're doing fine. We'll also show a game where Magnus Carlsen was playing white, and his opponent took on f4, which is another good way for black to try to equalize the position. But we'll even look very briefly here first at the more aggressive way for black to play, the way to really confuse you if you've never seen this before. In this position, c6. So this is the Nimzovich counter defense, the Nimzovich. Okay, so it's a little bit different, and now suddenly everybody is confused. So this is, if you haven't seen it before, it's really hard to navigate these paths. So this is a good way to play as black, because if your opponent doesn't know what to do here, it's very, very easy to make mistakes. Because I don't know who would even play the right move here as white. But we'll make some wrong moves first, so we can understand. Because there's a lot of pawns that can take each other. Or you could just develop your pieces. It's very tricky. Taking here is the worst. Why is it the worst?
I think queen to h4.
Right, queen to h4. Let's not forget about that. And then, okay, so yeah, if I go here, you're going here. And if I go here,
Bishop to E4.
bishop to g4. Okay, and you let me go here. Yeah, normally throwing this check in is going to be strong. And then you can throw this one in too. And then I can block, or I can go here and you can just like keep laughing at me. So yeah, this would probably be bad. I mean, okay, we can take this and other bad stuff might happen to you. So that's usually not the way to go. Okay, but what about this? This is also a popular response. Not that it's the best move, but a lot of people play this way. And okay, so black will take. And again, you have to make all these tough choices. So you can't really take on e5. So you can play bishop to b5. The point is, you see that you want to play this move. And okay, here black should probably take this. But you need to also consider this possible move that black has. And what's funny about this position is, well, it's probably equal, but it's complicated. Now you can get away with this, which even though after you take, black can throw this check in again. In this variation, black has a pawn in the way. So it doesn't work as well. So that's another thing. If there's something on e4 or something protecting e4, then this queen check usually doesn't work. And even if you did play this way, this is probably a bad move to play as black, because let's say you go all the way back. Now it's white's turn again, and development is going to mean more in this position than having forced white to play the weakening g3 move, because you're not going to be able to take advantage of g3 if all of your pieces are on the back rank. So if you had more pieces out, then inducing g3 might be advantageous. But here it would be white to move and he'd get his pieces out. Okay. But okay, so instead, okay, you can also play bishop to b5 so that you can play knight to f3 without a hassle. And if they take, normally black can play moves like bishop to d6 in these positions with the idea of putting his knight on e7. And from e7, he can protect his pawn if necessary. And he also is looking into some of these squares in a lot of lines. So very often the knight goes to e7 in these lines rather than f6, though, I mean, f6 also is a very decent square for a knight. And okay, you get a position like this, and things are normal. So this is one possible variation. All right, and let's go here again. All right, and then we'll try to remember what we've looked at already. So we've kind of looked at both captures. This one is more playable. But the most common move for white here, if he's trying to play for an advantage, and probably knows a little bit of theory, is the move knight to c3. And then again, like there's so many pawns that can take things that it's really confusing if you're unaware of what's going on. The main move here is to take on e4. If you take here, white will take on e5. And notice again, if you play queen to h4, the knight is protecting e4, so it's not going to work out as well. So queen h4, g3, and white is fine. So instead, they can play this aggressive move. They can push you around a little bit. All right, so knight e4. And now queen h4 still doesn't work because you can play knight f2 or knight to g3. So queen to d5. And okay, the most common move for white, again, might be a surprise. Queen to e2. And black should play knight to c6. But let's blunder. Woohoo! All right, now what should white play? Knight f3, excellent. So if you go to e6, knight takes d4 is good. And what did he play if they go here? Knight d6. Yeah, and this is pretty bad news for black here. Okay, if you have to move your king, okay, I mean, I might be able to trade and you have to worry about f7, and there's all sorts of bad stuff happening here, and white is already winning. So this would be a mistake. So you can play here, and you get this sort of position. where everybody's confused after bishop to g4. And you get a position like this. And it turns out white is a little bit better here. But obviously you could play this way. And there's so many tricky things you have to navigate to play this variation that it makes it a very useful weapon for people that are willing to put in a little bit of time and study the variations. So let's look at now the main line here. So now this is what the way most players typically play. And after this move, a move that also might surprise you, because you probably think, okay, you take back on d5. But black can also get on with development. He doesn't want to fall too far behind in development. And white can take now, or he can wait patiently. And only when it's forced he can capture. And so you get an interesting position. We'll just go a few more moves here. And everybody castles. And you get a position like this where white has a 4-2 majority on the queen side. And black has a 4-2 majority on the king side. So this is actually a typical pawn structure that you get when you play this opening. So we'll see similar pawn structures in the two games that we're going to look at in just a second here. White's pawns are a little bit healthier in that none of them are doubled, and the d4 pawn is a passed pawn. So that's definitely his trump. However, the black king is a little bit safer than the white king. So when black starts storming with his pawns, it could be a little bit more dangerous for white. But overall, it should be a balanced position, which is pretty good news that even there's a lot of declined variations in the King's Gambit that are very playable and give black a reasonable position. So you don't have to accept if you don't want. You could play the Falkbeer Countergambit, for example. And there's a lot of interesting lines in there. But we'll jump to our games now. So this first game is a game between Magnus Carlsen and Wei Yi, who was 2752 at the time, the Chinese grandmaster. And this was played in 2010 in the King's tournament. So that's why he played the King's Gambit. And what was funny about this tournament too is that Carlsen, they asked him at the end, like, why'd you play the King's Gambit? He's not known for that. He's known for his positional slow play and whatever. And he said, okay, I'm having a bad tournament. It's the 4th round. He had like a half out of 3 points, or he wasn't doing very well. So he played the King's Gambit, and then he won this game. And so he's feeling pretty good. And then he went on to win the tournament by 2 points. So this game really turned his whole tournament around. Okay, and if Carlsen can play this and play against 2700s in a legitimate tournament, okay, anybody can play this in their tournaments here. And okay. It was the Falkbeer Countergambit. So he took, and now instead of c6, and instead of the main line, his opponent took on f4. And this variation should be about equal. If you play the main line, it's just an equal way to play, so you have nothing really to fear here as black. This is a great try to equalize the game. And okay, now black is thinking about queen to h4. So knight to f3, and black played knight to f6. And here white has a lot of choices. In this game, he chose bishop to c4, which is not the most popular move, but he had probably prepared something here. The most common way to play is bishop to b5. In this way, you make sure you get this pawn. And again, you'll get a situation where it's a 4-on-2 versus a 4-on-2. And the main line actually goes like this. And okay, so you get a position like this where, again, white has the healthier pawn structure, but black has the safer king, and you should have a rather balanced game. Later, in a blitz game in 2012, Carlsen in this position preferred the move c4. And the game went as follows. So after c6, his intention was never to take, because then d4 would be really weak. But he played d4, and after the capture, he played c5. And when you play Magnus Carlsen, and he has a majority on one side, and you have a majority on the other, he does this, and like everybody queens, and then you lose. That seems to be what happens. And that's what happened in this game, and it's what happened in the game that we're looking at today. So when he has a majority, man, he's really good at pushing his majority. Okay, so in this game, bishop to c4, and black took this pawn. Okay, white castled, bishop to e7, and now a controversial move. he played a move that's very surprising. He took on d5, which is not the most popular way to play, but when Carlson plays it, he's got some ideas. The most popular move here is d4, and we should look at the main line just so we can compare it to what actually happens in the game. So here castles, and only now do you take. And you can pick up the pawn and then gain a tempo on the queen. So, very standard. Black has the 2 bishops, but white is a little bit ahead in development. And, he's going to try to move his passers on the queen side. Instead, in this game, he took on d5. So black takes back, and now he wins a tempo on the queen. Okay, so he went back and d4. Now, we could castle or we could play g5. I'll let the audience decide. What would you guys do in this position? So if g5, this wasn't played, in the game he castled. White has a lot of normal moves, but I want to suggest a crazy move. You got it? You know what it is, Danny?
Knight takes g5.
Yeah, knight takes g5, the craziest move. And then, the audience is shaking their heads, like everybody's confused. Okay, so you're giving up a piece, huh? And then in this position, white should play the novelty, queen to e1, which is different than what's been played before, queen to e2, in that the rook here is protecting the queen. We'll see why that's important in a second. So here, you can either play a move like king to f8, which is probably your best chance here. And after some moves like this, we'll have at least 2 pawns, and we'll have lots of pressure down the f-file. So it should be enough compensation for white. Also interesting is if they play here. In this position, you can just take on f4, and now you'll see why we're on e1. So if they ever take our queen, our rook swings in. So it's 2 pawns for the piece, but if we imagine this position, which could happen, white ends up getting a lot of pressure here. For example, knight to d5. And if you protect your pawn, otherwise I'm going to take and win your rook. Knight to f6, and black can maybe hold this position together, but this looks like a really hard task because you can't develop your bishop. It's hard to move any of your pieces. So white should have compensation here for the piece, just based on how active his pieces are. There's not even that many pieces on the board, but this should be good for white. But okay, so he didn't play g5 and allow any crazy stuff that Carlson may have worked on at home. He just castled, the practical choice. So white gets the pawn. And now it's 4-on-3 versus a 3-on-2. Okay, and there's no doubled pawns in this game. All right. Okay, so he developed. White gets his queen out of the way. He's going to put his rooks on d1 and e1. The queen might go to f2 where she's off the open e-file. And, excuse me, here black made an interesting decision. One of black's trumps in this position is the 2 bishops. But he decided to play the move bishop to d6, which is sort of a big inaccuracy. He's giving away one of his biggest advantages. Instead, he might want to consider c6, and then he can maneuver his knight around and just sort of play the position with c6 here. But he decides to trade the bishops, and Carlson doesn't mind. Okay. So now you no longer have the 2 bishops. And I've seen Carlson, he's had this position like a couple times, usually in blitz. This was the only standard game I could find where he played the King's Gambit. But when he plays the King's Gambit, he gets the Falkbeer Countergambit like every time for some reason. So very, very interesting. And here, his problem is he wants to play the move c4 and get his 4-on-3 rolling. So in general, that's going to be the plans. The 4-on-3 is going to roll, and the 3-on-2, you want your majorities to go down the board, because then you can make a queen. So here, he played knight to b5, so that after the queen moved, he could play c4. And then black can kick the knight back, and the knight will just go back to c3. And he also did something interesting. There's 2 ways to do it, and he chose a6. which, okay, is probably fine, but later he might have wished that he played c6. So we get this position, and it's, okay, not a whole lot going on, you know. But this is sort of the positions Carlson is best at. He likes this. He positions where there's sort of a slight imbalance, and he slowly outplays his opponents. Okay, so he brings his rook over, and the bishop gets off the f-file. So we get this position here. And all right, things are just going smoothly. There's nothing a whole lot to say here. And now it's funny. So he's going really, really slow, Magnus Carlsen style. And then I guess his opponent didn't know what to do because he made a strange move here. So who can play like a 2700? Probably only Danny Machuca could play such a strange move. Yeah, I knew you could do it. Yeah, rook to c8, threatening nothing. So it's not like you're going to play c5, because then I just play d5. So I think he's just like waiting. He's like, what are you going to do? And all right. So sort of a strange move that doesn't do anything. And okay, so he traded some rooks. And now he plays the move c6. All right. And he pushes his pawn. So he's going to create a passer. And so the rest of the game is sort of going to revolve around him pushing his passer and whether or not he can do it. So white could very easily take on d5 in this moment. But he waited, giving white the option of taking on c6 if he wants. But he decided, okay, I'll just play queen d4, and I'll let you trade. And in this position, you can take with the pawn or the knight. And perhaps he calculated. And then he took with his knight. So after this trade, he must have seen this position and evaluated that this pawn is good, and he likes the knight versus bishop in this position. And we'll try to understand why. So black blockades. And now he needs to find a way to push this pawn, which means he needs to attack the d6 square. So hopefully you can figure out what he did with his knight here. So he played knight to e5. The point is, you can play knight to c4, and then you can push your pawn. And if you ever play a move like b5, you're going to give up the c6 square. So if you play here, occasionally the knight will be able to jump into this square, though not immediately because of rook takes knight. But okay. So black played here. Now you can't play knight to c4. So I went here, so he can play knight to c4. And now what did white play? He played knight to c4. That's what he wanted to do. So notice that this is not a very good move. White's not just hanging his pawn. What would you play here? You. Queen takes? All right, that's good. That's much better than what was suggested before, which is here. Somebody suggested that, and then they get your rook. So I just didn't suggest that. But yeah, better is just winning the queen outright, because you can't take the queen because of the back rank. Okay. So he went here, giving you the chance to double his pawns. But he's played instead rook to e5, keeping the queens on the board. You can also take here. This is the bad news for black, is that this ending is also very good for white. If you take, you still have the 2-on-1, and this also is good for white. But his move is perhaps even stronger, rook to e5, and he's ready to push his pawn. So after some moves, he pushed. And all right, so he keeps trying to get control of the next square he needs to go to. And then in typical Carlsen style, he doesn't do anything for a long time. He just very, very slow improvements. So he pushes a4. He's going to play a5, just cement his knight there. But now, after g6, he plays a tricky move. Queen to c3, threatening rook takes e6. And then if you take the queen, we can throw this check in before we take back here. So he protected his queen, And very soon, black found it very hard to move. You can't really move this bishop anywhere over here because of knight to d5. And then if your queen moves, there's going to be some discoveries. It's hard. You can't really move your rook. You can't really move your queen. Maybe you could play king to g8. But he'd had enough, and he decides to sacrifice. All right, so this gets rid of his problems. And then you get this ending, which is not very easy to win. It's not like this is the easiest ending in the world. But he defends his pawn, and then he decides to trade the queens. So you get an ending where it's black has a pawn for the exchange, but white has a strong plan of just centralizing his king here. And then this was the final mistake. Black has to sort of do nothing, but okay, with the king coming in here and infiltrating on the queen side, it's kind of hard to come up with something, but he did something. And okay, now the game was almost over after the move g4. And we'll kind of go quickly through this, but okay, this pawn went down the board. And here he just pushed his pawn. What's funny too is even if you take this and you say, aha, I got all these 3 passed pawns, you really don't have much. If you ever play here, then king f2. If you ever play here, we can just like mop up stuff. And you're a long ways from making a threat, which is kind of surprising. But the more you look at it, the more you'll realize just black can't do anything. And white's just going to play b5 and then make another queen over here. So that's why he didn't even try that. So he let him queen. And all right, one last little trick. The problem is white can probably even take the bishop and allow black to queen on f1, but why would you do that? And okay, so here he resigned. Because even if you queen, let's go ahead and make a queen. Probably here. This looks pretty good. Okay, because if you go here, then at least rook f7. But okay, yeah, doesn't look like you're gonna live for very long. So a very instructive game by Carlson about how to use your majority. He got a passed pawn. He was able to fight for the squares that he needed to advance his pawn. And okay, all in all, a really well played game by him. And it helped him. He went on and then he won that tournament. So yeah, he's pretty good. But now we'll come on to the main line of the Falkbeer Countergambit. Does it say how much time we got?
Yeah, you're 23 minutes.
23 minutes? All right, I think we can do it. Okay, so we come back to this position, and now we'll focus on the main line here, e4. And this is, okay, so again, black has given up a pawn to make it really hard for white to develop his pieces. So white's best move is to fight against the thorn pawn on e4 with the move d3. And black shouldn't take on d3 and help white develop. He should play knight to f6. And if white gets rid of that pawn, he takes. And the main move here, if you develop, so yeah, queen h4 was a threat. Black plays here, and then you get worried if you've never seen this before as white. It looks really scary, you know? These pieces are coming in. Maybe he's going to play something to f2, bishop or knight. They both look a little bit scary. But white has this move, queen to e2. And black should play bishop to f5. If you play bishop to f2, very tempting. I mean, why not? Black is actually losing. People are shaking their heads like they know this position. Yeah, smart audience tonight. Okay, so after king to d1, I mean, okay, I take this. This looks pretty good. But what is white's winning move here? You better play the right move. So black's taking your stuff, your king's on d1, but you do have some pressure on the e file. That knight is still pinned, but here you have to play the right move. Okay, so this seems like the most logical move you could make. But actually here, black would just probably cement his piece here. And yeah, you can't even take. This knight would be much better on c3. But okay, you can't play that because you're in check. So the winning move is knight to d2, but it's the other one. This way, okay, so you attack the knight on e4, and you can attack it again with knight to c3. So this time, if you cement your knight in there, knight to c3, and after your queen moves, you can take this. So you better take back. And okay, so instead of just taking that, even better is inserting the move c3. The queen has to stay where she's protecting the bishop on f2. So the most common is queen to e3. And you could trade some stuff and take your e4 pawn back. But even stronger is queen to h5. Okay, and after they move bishop c4, you're threatening a checkmate. And let's say black sees it. The crushing move here is queen to d5. So you're threatening checkmate, and knight takes e4. And so white should have a decisive winning position here, especially you got some pressure coming down at the f-file pretty soon here. Okay, so this actually should be completely winning for white. But okay, if you haven't seen this before and you run into this position as black, it does look tempting, right? Bishop to f2. A very tempting move, but not a good one. Instead, you should protect your knight. And it may appear that this is a blunder, because I see people going, so it looks like a blunder, because what if they just played g4? So this is going to be the game that we're going to look at in just a second, a game between Spielmann and Tarrasch that was played in 1923. But first, let's look at the main line. A more common move for white is just to develop knight to c3. And this often leads to an endgame. So we're threatening to win on something on e4 here. And after this, there's two different endgames that black can go into. But Lulu's like looking at her watch, so we'll only go over one of them. The most common one is to take on e3 and then trade everything. And you get this endgame. And actually, white should be better in this endgame. This isn't something white should be afraid of here. Okay, you're probably tempted to take on c2, but more common for black is to play bishop to e4, figuring either I'm going to double your pawns or I'm going to win your d pawn, which is more important than your doubled c pawns. And it does look at first sight like, okay, so material is about to be equal when black gets his pawn back here. And okay, white's position is a little shattered, so maybe this is better for black. But that's actually not the case. In this position, white can get a lot of activity that will more than compensate for the damaged pawn structure that he has here with a move like knight to g5. And okay, you're going to take, and now we castle. And okay, so the most common move is c6. But you're probably wondering what happens if you take here. And the problem is the move c4. And the bishop is starting to get trapped. You can try to get out of this bind, but among white's good moves, he can just develop. And all right, there's several lines. If you take with the bishop, for example, we'll see in a lot of lines, there's lots of activity. You usually can't go back here because, okay, you can see, whoops, well, fine, we'll do that. Checkmate. So you can see white gets a lot of activity, and so if you can force the king to f6, well, you have threats here. You have all sorts of threats that are coming in, and white's position is so active that it's actually bad news for black. I guess we'll go over one more line. Okay, and again, king f6, because if here, you can take here, threatening checkmate and the bishop. So yeah, you can kind of get an idea that something like this is really bad for black. So you can't really take this pawn. So we'll speed through this one more time. So this will be sort of the starting point. And white will usually attack the h-pawn and bring his other piece in. And his pieces are very, very active, which is more important in this position than the fact that your c-pawns are doubled. Okay, but let's get back to our featured game here. So we'll go all the way back. All right, so after this, bishop f5. In the game Spielmann, Tarrasch, the blunder g4 was played, But I want to give the audience a chance to figure out what black should play here. It looks good. You know, you move your bishop away, and I'll take your knight, and I'll be so happy. So this was the first recorded game with this position, and black found the best move. So since then, this has been the most common move. And so since people know this game, I guess, if you play this variation, they know the best move here for black is simply to castle, which is a bit shocking, right? I mean, wow, okay, thank you. But what was black intending to play here?
Rook to E8.
Rook to E8. And this threat along the E file is already very bad news for white. So white here is flirting with a very lost position. And what's nice about this game is for a long time, white played all the best defensive moves, but he still lost. So this is good for black. He tried bishop to G2. All right, computer likes it. That's fine. Knight to F2. And okay, losing your queen is the most important thing here. Let's not lose our queen. So he went here, and he lost in exchange here. And it's very easy to make a mistake here as black. It's very easy. I think most people would not play the best move here.
F6.
F6, not the best move, but very tempting, right? Okay, right? You want to attack the pinned piece with your weakest thing, but this allows a brilliant repartee for white in the move D6. And okay, you intend here. For example, if you take this, we can check. And after you go back, we can take here. And white might be able to survive in a position like this. So the worst is sort of over for white. Obviously, his king is still weak, so he does have to be really careful. But he didn't, lose material here as much as he would in the main line. So D6 a very, very sneaky, thing that white has going for him. And I suppose black must have seen it because he played the better move, knight to D7. And arg. So after some developing, now F6. So your bishop is protected. Yeah, the point of knight to D7 is to protect your bishop. Okay?
What?
I don't know. I thought you're like, No. Okay. So we got these trades. And yay, look, 6 connected passed pawns. Yeah. Here I go, all my pawns. And then white made a lot of queens. Okay, your king is a bit weak. And black played pretty well here. So the check is good. And then there's a lot of things, but okay, this move is good. And then you can easily take on F5. That's a good move. But he played trickier. He went here, check, and then he took the central pawn. So really kicking the legs out of all the pawns that might have done this to him. And then he continued to play the best but the trickiest. So we'll go through it as fast as we can here. So there's a pin on the E file, so we can't really move our bishop. So he unpins this way. And all right. So the queen might be coming into D2. He stops that. And then here white makes the final mistake that really kills him here. He takes this knight. And this is a blunder that really costs the game. It was already very, very bad for white. It was probably already losing, but this opening the G file just gives black access to the king, and there's nothing that can be done here. So he played H3, exclam, H3, H3. And then here he resigned. Well, yeah. I mean, I guess if you go here, sadly the best move is just to take the queen. You're not checkmating white, darn. And something like this also, I mean, if you're letting the queen come in, but also I might just take this. And I might take this. Like everything's hanging. Yeah, you can't really run away because we have here. So the game is almost over, so yeah, white gave it up. H3 didn't help him out, I guess. That was good, great move. But also, I mean, what else do you even play? I mean, okay, so that's a little introduction. So next week, we'll accept the gambit. and we'll do the main line. Or maybe we'll just do the King's Gambit for like the next few months. Maybe we'll never stop. Because at first I said, oh, we're just going to do 2. And then I told you 3. Maybe next week I'll be like, oh, we're going to do 4, 5. We're just going to never stop doing the King's Gambit. So thanks to Lulu for filling in for Ben Simon. She did fantastic. Thank you. And please hit like, share, subscribe, and we'll see you guys next time. Thank you.